There once lived a young man named Daniel in a bustling town nestled between rolling hills and endless horizons. Daniel was known throughout the community for two contrasting qualities: his brilliant mind and his extraordinary talent for postponing everything until tomorrow. He had dreams. Oh, such magnificent dreams. He wanted to write a novel that would touch hearts across the world. He imagined himself as a skilled craftsman, creating beautiful furniture with his hands. He envisioned learning 3 languages, traveling to distant lands, and becoming someone his younger self would be proud of. But Daniel had a problem he didn't fully recognize because it wore the comfortable mask of relaxation. Every morning, his alarm would sing its urgent song at 6 o'clock. And every morning, Daniel would silence it with a familiar promise. Just 10 more minutes, I'll start tomorrow. Today, I just need to rest a little more. When he sat down to write, the blank page seemed to mock him with its emptiness. I'll write when inspiration strikes, he would tell himself, reaching instead for his phone, scrolling through endless feeds of other people's accomplishments. When he thought about building that first piece of furniture, the tools in his garage seemed heavy with expectation. I'll start when I have more time, when I feel more motivated, when everything is perfect. Days melted into weeks. Weeks dissolved into months, and months evaporated into years. Daniel's dreams remained exactly where he had left them, in his mind, perfect and untouched, but never real. One autumn evening, as golden leaves danced outside his window, Daniel received news that shook him to his core. His childhood friend Marcus was releasing his 3rd published book. Marcus, who had started writing at the same time Daniel had talked about writing. Marcus, who had faced the same blank pages, the same doubts, the same busy life. The difference? Marcus had written 1 page every single day, just 1 page, nothing heroic, nothing extraordinary. Just 1 page, day after day, for 3 years. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest, not quite pain, but not quite comfort either. It was the sound of time revealing its true nature. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. A question haunted him like a persistent ghost. What is my laziness really costing me? Unable to find peace, Daniel decided to take a walk through the town. The cool night air carried the scent of wood smoke and distant rain. His feet, as if guided by some unconscious wisdom, led him to the edge of town where an old stone bridge crossed a gentle river. There, sitting on the bridge's edge with his feet dangling over the water, was an elderly man Daniel had seen before, but never spoken to. The townspeople called him Old Thomas, a retired carpenter who spent his evenings by the river. "Restless mind?" Old Thomas asked, without looking up, his voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. Daniel hesitated, then sat beside him. "How did you know?" "The same way I know the river is flowing," Thomas replied, gesturing to the water below. "Some things are simply obvious when you pay attention." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the moonlight dance on the water's surface. "I'm tired," Daniel finally said, "but not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. I'm tired of being myself, tired of having dreams but never chasing them, tired of watching everyone else build their lives while I just watch." Old Thomas nodded slowly. "Tell me, young man, do you see this river?" "Of course," Daniel replied. "How long do you think it has been flowing?" "I don't know. Hundreds of years? Thousands?" "Longer," Thomas said. "This river has been flowing since before this town existed. Since before your grandfather's grandfather walked this earth. Do you know why it carved this path through solid stone?" Daniel shook his head. "Because it never stopped. Not for one single day. Not when it was tired. not when the sun was too hot or the winter too cold. Every second of every day it moved, just a little, just enough. And over time, tiny drops of water carved through mountains. Thomas picked up a small pebble and dropped it into the water. The ripples spread outward in perfect circles. Now tell me, what do you think would happen if this river decided to take a break? If it said, "Today I'm too tired. Today I don't feel inspired. I'll flow tomorrow when I feel more motivated." It would stop being a river, Daniel said quietly. Exactly. It would become a puddle, stagnant, still. Eventually it would dry up completely and no one would ever know a river had been there at all. The words hit Daniel like a physical force. He thought about all his unwritten pages, his unused tools, his unlived dreams, puddles that had dried up before they ever had a chance to flow. "But I'm so tired," Daniel protested. "Everyone talks about working hard, about discipline, about pushing through. I've tried that. It exhausts me." Old Thomas smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening like well-worn paths. "Ah, now we arrive at the real problem. You think laziness means rest. You think procrastination means preserving your energy. But let me tell you something I learned after 60 years of working with my hands." He held up his weathered palms, showing Daniel decades of calluses and scars. Laziness is not rest. Laziness is the most exhausting way to live. Daniel frowned, confused. "How can laziness be exhausting? Isn't it literally about not doing things?" "Let me show you something," Thomas said, standing up with surprising agility for his age. "Follow me." They walked to Thomas's workshop, a small wooden building behind his house. Inside, the smell of sawdust and oil filled the air. Tools hung in perfect order on the walls. Half-finished projects occupied various workbenches. Thomas lit a lantern and gestured around the space. "I've been a carpenter for 47 years. Do you know how I've never burned out? How I've never lost my love for this work?"
"How?" Daniel asked, genuinely curious, "because I never lie to myself about tomorrow." Thomas walked to a corner where a massive oak wardrobe stood, its surface gleaming with intricate carvings. "This piece took me 9 months to complete. 9 months of working 2 hours every single day, no more, no less. Some days I felt inspired and wanted to work longer. Some days I felt tired and wanted to skip. But I made a promise to this wood. 2 hours every day, no negotiation." He ran his hand lovingly over the carved surface. "Do you know what happens when you keep a promise like that?" "You finish the project?" Daniel ventured. "No, something much more important. You silence the voice." "What voice?" "The voice that exhausts you," Thomas explained, his eyes intense in the lamplight. "The voice that wakes up with you every morning and asks, 'Will I work today? Should I start now or later? Do I feel motivated enough? What if I fail? Maybe tomorrow will be better.' That voice, that endless negotiation with yourself, that is what drains you. That is the hidden cost of laziness." Daniel felt something shift in his understanding, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. Thomas continued, "When you procrastinate, you think you're saving energy. But your mind never stops working. It never stops feeling guilty. It never stops calculating what you should be doing. It never stops comparing yourself to others. That constant mental battle is more exhausting than any physical work could ever be." He walked to another workbench where a simple wooden box sat, half completed. "This is my current project. I started it 3 days ago. Some people might say it's not impressive, it's just a box. But I'm not tired, I'm not guilty, I'm not anxious, because I showed up. I kept my promise, and tomorrow I'll keep it again." Daniel looked around the workshop with new eyes. Dozens of completed projects, hundreds of hours of work, thousands of small decisions to show up. "The river doesn't get tired,"
Thomas said softly, because it never stops to negotiate with itself. It simply flows, and in that simplicity, it finds power. Daniel stood in silence, feeling the weight of years of accumulated tomorrows pressing down on his shoulders.
"How do I start?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've wasted so much time already, I'm so far behind." Thomas turned to face him fully, placing both hands on Daniel's shoulders. "That question, that is the trap. You're asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?"
You're asking, how do I start? As if you need some perfect moment, some surge of motivation, some magical feeling that will make it easy. But that moment will never come. Motivation is a myth that lazy people use as an excuse.
The words stung, but Daniel recognized the truth in them. "The question is not how do I start?"
Thomas continued. "The question is what is waiting for me at the end of the river of days I refuse to flow through." He walked Daniel to a covered object in the corner and pulled off the cloth, revealing a rocking chair of breathtaking beauty. Every curve was perfect. Every joint was seamless. The wood seemed to glow with an inner light. "This chair," Thomas said, "I built it 20 years ago for my wife. It took me 6 months. 2 hours a day, every day. She sat in it every evening until the day she passed away 3 years ago." His voice grew thick with emotion, but he continued. "Now imagine if I had procrastinated on this chair. Imagine if I had said tomorrow for 6 months straight. She would have missed 6 months of comfort. 6 months of reading her books in a chair made with love. 6 months of feeling valued, of knowing that I kept my promise to her." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. "I never thought about it that way." "That's the hidden cost," Thomas said, his voice gentle but firm. "Laziness doesn't just cost you productivity or success. It costs you the ability to love fully, to give completely, to be the person others can rely on. Every day you procrastinate is a day someone who needs you, maybe your future self, maybe someone who will love what you create, doesn't receive what only you can give them." Thomas walked back to the unfinished box. "When I work on this box, I'm not just making a box. I'm keeping a promise to my future self. I'm telling him, I showed up for you today.
I laid one more brick in the foundation of your peace. I silenced the voice of guilt for another day. I proved that you are the kind of man who keeps his word." He turned to Daniel with eyes that held both challenge and compassion. "The real question isn't about talent or time or opportunity. The real question is, what kind of person do you want to be? Someone who dreams or someone who builds? Someone who wishes or someone who creates? Someone who talks about rivers or someone who carves them into stone?"
In that moment, standing in the workshop surrounded by the evidence of consistent action, Daniel understood something profound. His laziness had never been about lacking energy. It had been about lacking identity. He had been living as someone who wanted to be instead of someone who was. He wanted to be a writer, but had never claimed the identity of someone who writes. He wanted to be a creator, but had never embodied the identity of someone who creates. He wanted to be disciplined, but had never acted as someone who is disciplined. And that gap between who he wanted to be and who he actually was had been filled with exhausting mental negotiations, guilt, anxiety, and the constant weight of broken promises to himself. "I understand now," Daniel said, his voice stronger. "I've been waiting to feel like a writer before I write. Waiting to feel motivated before I act. Waiting to be someone I admire before I do the things that person would do." "And," Thomas prompted, "and it's backwards. I have to write to become a writer. I have to act to become motivated. I have to do the things today that my future self would thank me for." Thomas smiled, a deep satisfaction visible in his weathered features. "Now you're understanding. The river doesn't wait to feel like flowing, it simply flows, and in the flowing, it becomes mighty." Daniel left old Thomas' workshop as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. But he was not the same Daniel who had entered just hours before. He went home, and instead of going to bed, he did something he had never done before. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and wrote. Not when he felt inspired, not when he felt motivated, not when the words felt perfect. He wrote because he had decided to be someone who writes. The first paragraph was terrible, the second was worse, but the third contained a sentence that made him pause, not because it was brilliant, but because it existed. It was real. It was no longer trapped in the prison of someday. 1 page, that's all he wrote that first morning, just 1 page. But when he finished, something extraordinary happened. The voice that had tormented him for years, the voice of guilt, of should have and could have, grew quieter. He had kept a promise to himself, and in keeping that promise, he had proved something more powerful than any motivation. He had proved he was trustworthy. The next morning, his alarm rang at 6 o'clock. His hand reached for the snooze button, following years of muscle memory. But then he remembered the river. He remembered the rocking chair. He remembered the unfinished box. He remembered the kind of person he had decided to be. He got up. He sat at his desk. He wrote another page. The third morning was harder. He was tired. The words felt forced. Every sentence seemed like a struggle. The old voice whispered its familiar temptations. You've written 2 days in a row. That's good enough. Rest today. You've earned it. But Daniel understood now that this voice was not offering rest. It was offering exhaustion. It was offering the return to endless negotiation, to broken promises, to the stagnant puddle of postponed dreams. He wrote his page. 1 week became 2. 2 weeks became a month became 3 months, and something miraculous began to happen. Not all at once, but gradually, like the river carving through stone. Daniel's mind became quieter, calmer, more focused. The anxiety that had plagued him for years began to dissolve because he was no longer carrying the weight of unkept promises. He wasn't accumulating debt to his future self anymore. Instead, he was making deposits. After 6 months, he had written 180 pages. Not a finished novel, but 180 pages more than he had written in the previous 10 years. After a year, he had a complete first draft, rough, imperfect, but real. He also finally unpacked those tools in his garage. He made his first piece of furniture, a simple shelf. It wasn't as beautiful as old Thomas's rocking chair. It wobbled slightly if you pushed it, but it existed. And in its existence, it proved something more valuable than perfection. It proved that Daniel was no longer a dreamer paralyzed by the fear of imperfect action. He was a builder who understood that everything excellent begins as something merely adequate. 2 years after that autumn night on the bridge, Daniel published his first novel. It didn't become a bestseller. Critics gave it mixed reviews, but 3 people wrote to him saying that his words had helped them through dark times. 3 people whose lives were touched because Daniel had chosen to flow instead of stagnate. One evening, Daniel returned to the stone bridge. Old Thomas was there, as he often was, watching the river. "I wanted to thank you," Daniel said, sitting beside him. Thomas smiled. "Thank the river. I just pointed at it. My book is published. It's not perfect, but it's real. That's because you stopped trying to be perfect and started being consistent. Perfection is a destination that doesn't exist. Consistency is a river that never stops flowing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the water carve its eternal path through stone. "I still struggle some days," Daniel admitted. "Some mornings I still want to hit snooze. Some evenings I still want to skip my writing time." "And you will until the day you die," Thomas said matter-of-factly. The voice never completely disappears, but it gets quieter, and you get stronger. Not because you feel more motivated, but because you've built a mountain of evidence that proves you are the kind of person who keeps their promises to themselves. Daniel nodded, understanding. "The hidden cost of laziness, I see it now. It's not just the unfinished projects or the unrealized dreams. It's the person I never became. The trust I never built with myself, the peace I never felt." "And now?" Thomas asked. "Now I'm paying a different price. The price of showing up. The price of doing hard things when I don't feel like it." "But that price?" Daniel paused, searching for the right words. "That price buys something laziness never could."
What's that? Self-respect? Peace?
"The quiet confidence of knowing that when I make a promise to myself, I'll keep it. And maybe most importantly, the ability to look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back." Old Thomas placed a weathered hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You've learned what takes most people a lifetime to understand. Laziness and procrastination aren't personality traits. They're not who you are. They're simply patterns, and patterns can be changed one day at a time, one page at a time, one promise kept at a time." The sun set behind the hills, painting the river in shades of gold and orange. The water continued its eternal journey, never stopping, never negotiating, never postponing until tomorrow what it could do today. And in that moment, Daniel understood the final truth. He had become the river. The hidden cost of laziness is not measured in unfinished projects or missed opportunities. Those are merely symptoms of a deeper loss. The true cost is the person you never become, the trust you never build with yourself, the quiet confidence that comes from keeping promises even when no one is watching. Every day you procrastinate, you're not just postponing a task, you're postponing your own transformation. You're choosing to remain the person who wishes instead of becoming the person who builds. But here's the beautiful truth that Daniel discovered. You don't need motivation to change. You don't need to feel inspired or perfect or ready. You just need to decide who you want to be and then act as that person would act, today, right now, in this imperfect moment. The river doesn't wait until it feels like flowing. It simply flows. Day after day, hour after hour, second after second. And in that simple, unglamorous consistency, it carves canyons through mountains. Your dreams are not impossible. They're simply on the other side of consistent action. They're waiting for you at the end of a river of days where you showed up, did the work, and kept your promises to yourself. Laziness whispers that tomorrow will be easier, but tomorrow never comes. There is only today and what you choose to do with it. Procrastination promises rest but delivers exhaustion. The exhaustion of broken promises, accumulated guilt, and endless negotiation with yourself. Action promises challenge but delivers peace. The peace of knowing you are becoming who you want to be, one small step at a time. The question is not, do I feel like doing this today? The question is, what kind of person do I want to be? And the answer to that question is found not in what you say, or what you wish, or what you plan to do tomorrow. The answer is found in what you do today, right now. In this imperfect, uncomfortable, unglamorous moment. So ask yourself, what is one page I can write today? What is one small promise I can keep? What is one brick I can lay in the foundation of my future? And then do it. Not because you feel motivated, not because you feel ready, not because you feel inspired. Do it because you have decided to be the river that flows, not the puddle that dries up. Do it because you understand the hidden cost of laziness, and you've decided the price is too high to pay. Your future self is waiting on the other side of consistent action. They're waiting for the person you become through the simple, powerful act of showing up. Every single day. The river is calling. It is time to flow.